Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I like to put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock that I'm really excited about and want to share with you guys. And I have a huge one today. This is probably my favorite artist of all time. If you watch my channel regularly, you know that this is an artist that I hold in high esteem and just love everything they put out. This is Neal Morse and The Resonance, and the new album No Hill for a Climber. And I have quite a storied history with Neal Morse. He was basically the one who brought me into the progressive rock fold, at least in the modern era. I was introduced to prog music through my dad, through the classic artists that he loves, namely Yes, Genesis, and Gentle Giant. And I went in search on my own for modern versions of that because I was a teenager. I wanted something that sounded a bit more modern and fresh compared to the classic 70s sound. And I stumbled across a collection of artists. I stumbled across Transatlantic and the bands that made it up. And what struck me right away was Neal Morse and his songwriting, both with Duel with the Devil from Bridge Across Forever that I had listened to, and The Light by Spock's Beard. That was one of my first introductions into the world of Spock's Beard and Neal Morse. So I was impressed right off the bat, and it was instant love at first listen, in my opinion. And it just sparked a really deep connection that I felt with Neal Morse all throughout the years. I've been to almost every concert he's been involved in my area, in the LA area, of the past 20 years or so. And it's been one of the most meaningful, best parts of my musical experience to follow Neal Morse, to see him through all these different iterations and different bands, seeing him follow his muse and create these epic pieces of music, these wonderful concept albums, and continue to top himself, as you think he might be in the twilight years of his career and, winding down perhaps or leading towards retirement. No, he's ramping up and continues to reinvent himself and do new and great things in the world of progressive rock. And Neal Morse is not immune to lots of criticism from the progressive rock community, both for his leaning into Christian lyrics and themes in his music that some people either don't like because they just don't line up with those Christian beliefs and values, or because they just feel like he just keeps going back to the same lyrical well and talking about the same subjects over and over again. And he gets criticism on a musical level as well when people consider that his music has similar structures and he continues to repeat himself and do a lot of things similarly. He has a very specific style and sound that he doesn't stray too far from. But for me, I don't mind the lyrical content. I am very open to whatever any artist wants to talk about as long as it's something they're passionate about and wish to express to their listeners. And I feel like Neal does that. And with his music, yes, it follows a similar structure. I would agree, especially his epics. I can hear that, and as a big fan, I can hear music from him and constantly think, okay, this is similar to this thing he did with Spock's Beard, this thing he did with Neal Morse Band. And you can make those comparisons, but to me, what's important about an artist that I love is that they have a musical identity, that you can hear their music and immediately know that it's that artist. And I love his signature sound. I love that he has that. And I feel like he continues to experiment with different styles, different sounds, different band members. He brings these younger musicians to bring a new flavor and a new dimension to his work that I think adds a lot to the makes. He did this with Neal Morse Band when he released the Grand Experiment with them, adding in a couple new people into the fold who contributed to the writing and to a lot of the different styles that were found on board that album and on subsequent Neal Morse Band albums. And I feel like he's doing a similar thing now with The Resonance, which is the new group that he's bringing into the Neal Morse universe, so to speak. And these are great young musicians that are local to his Nashville area, who he's worked with probably in church and in different settings throughout the years, and Morse Fests and different albums that they've contributed in more limited fashion. But here they're coming on as full-fledged members of this new group, The Resonance, and adding a new sparkle, adding a new dimension to his sound that previously wasn't heard. And I think it really bolsters this album up to a new level, because it has the typical Morseisms. It has a lot of these styles that you're used to from his vast career of music, these big epic build-ups, these quirky, fiddly instrumental bits, these very anthemic choruses and catchy moments and vocal harmonies. It's all there in spades, all the things you've come to expect from him. But there's some sections written by these new band members, or where these new band members get a chance to shine with their vocal abilities or playing styles, and it adds a whole new dimension and variety to the music. So, all that being said, Neal Morse and the Resonance, No Hill for a Climber, is a triumph in Neal Morse's catalog, a new benchmark for his quality level, and showcases Neal Morse at his best, bringing on some young new talent and reinventing himself just enough to be exciting to his fans, but to not abandon his core signature sound that people have come to love him for. And so I'm just really impressed by this record. I think it's one of the best that Neal's put out in a while here. He continues to put out high quality releases, so it kind of falls hollow when you say it's his best release since probably Neal Morse Band's Innocence and Danger, which isn't all that long ago. That came out I believe in 2021, so that's only about 3 years old at this point. But compared to his latest output, because he's a very prolific artist, I like this a lot more than the Joseph albums, if I'm being honest, and I like this more than Sola Gratia that he put out as a solo artist, and some of the other more singer-songwritery things that he's been doing. To me, this is the meat and potatoes of what Neal Morse does best, his big, epic prog music, and it's just a joy to behold and to listen to, and I'm glad he's back making this, even if the Neal Morse Band proper is somewhat on hiatus, especially because of Mike Portnoy and his involvement with Dream Theater. So we get this cool new configuration that's able to play this Neal Morse style big epic prog, and I couldn't be happier. Joseph leaned more into this musical theater style direction, and sometimes a bit more straightforward rock in its more conventional songs. I felt like Sola Gratia was a little bit limited in scope and didn't contain a lot of contributions outside of Neal's own worldview. And his singer-songwriter stuff, while pleasant, just hasn't struck the same chord and can feel a bit samey and simplistic. But here we've got some really meaty prog to dive into, and I just really love it. It seems like this band got together based on Neal Morse's wife suggesting it at the end of 2023 that he should work with some of the younger, more talented guys that live locally, that work with them on their Christmas concerts and other events local. They kicked around a lot of ideas in January 2024. The new guys brought in some new ideas. Morse brought in his own concepts as well, and they were able to really contribute and work together and formulate this new album. One of the highlights of the record to me is the contributions of one Chris Riley, who's worked quite a bit with Neal in the past, but he contributes some really cool unique sections to this album. It seems that they drew them from work he did with Neal Morse at Neal Morse's Radiant School, where Neal works with a lot of different other young talent that's inspired by Neal and working on their own musical pieces. And so it's a cool way for people to learn from Neal's storied history and the genre, and for him to get introduced to all this great young talent. And we hear that in some of the sections on the opening epic, Eternity in Your Eyes. There's a section called Northern Lights, which is just really dreamy and psychedelic and has these cool effects-laden vocals. It almost reminds me of Inmate's Lullaby from Gentle Giant, this really quirky, creepy, almost vocal section. It's really interesting how it's done, and it almost leans into this kind of Pink Floyd kind of vibier section, and it reminds me a bit of Pete Trewavas's contribution on the latest Transatlantic albums, especially his section on Kaleidoscope, which has this kind of dreamy Beatles-y kind of feel to it. And then we've got Hammer and Nail section, which is a really quirky instrumental, which kind of reminds me of like something Royna Stolt would throw into the mix for Transatlantic, with some cool shuffling drums and bumbling bass lines and a bouncy, fun flavor with some added guitar and keys soloing on top, very proggy and driving, and it provides a nice variety in this epic piece that has a lot of these sweeping, more epic moments in it. Also, this King Crimson instrumental bit in the song Thief, which is just really crazy and chaotic and introduces these really cool musical elements and a lot of surprises and things you wouldn't expect, and maybe a darker, more King Crimson vibe than what you typically hear in Neal's music. And in No Hill for a Climber, one of my favorite sections in the final epic is Burn It Down, which he contributed, which has this really mysterious, almost Eastern style feel to it. Some cool violin stabs and just a driving beat. Reminds me a bit of Lay Down Your Life moment in The Whirlwind, and some furious playing, some cool tempo change-ups, and some really interesting sections and build-ups. One of my favorite moments on the record for sure. So we get some really interesting, quirky little bits that you don't typically hear in a Neal Morse album because of the contributions of some of the different members here. And to round out some of the other Resonance members, aside from Chris Riley, who contributes keyboards, guitars, bass, and lead vocals, we've got Andre Madassian on guitars and orchestration. We've got Johnny Basaha on lead vocals, and then drum duty is done by Philip Martin on several tracks, and Joe Ganzelli as well. So we've got a really cool lineup of musicians who are each contributing their own unique flavors and producing a great album that I just love from front to back. It's bookended by these two massive epics that are everything you'd want to hear in a Neal Morse epic. Eternity in Your Eyes, to me, is kind of the straightforward epic Neal Morse piece that you'd expect from like an epic transatlantic tune like All of the Above. Maybe something like Alive Again from Grand Experiment. It begins with your typical orchestral flourishes and over-the-top prog majesty and a really expanded overture section. There's a quirky fiddly bit that reminds me a lot of early Spocksbeard, like something like on Go the Way You Go from The Light. Things get a bit darker and funkier. You get some cool bass line moments, similar to what Randy George does a lot in the different iterations of Neal Morse Band and Neal Morse solo work. See the Sun is when you get the typical Neal Morse led section, great sumptuous vocal melodies. It feels like just home to me. It's like comfort prog. It's just exactly what Neal does the best. I get a bit of a Spocksbeard Snow vibe with this more anthemic and beautiful feeling to it. Really soft guitar solos and piano flourishes wouldn't feel out of place on any of the Neal Morse Band releases as well. And as it continues on, like I said, it has those Chris Riley sections that add a different quirk and style. There's this really cool extended jazzy section with this really cool bluesy guitar solo that's blistering and exciting and takes center stage for quite a bit of the piece here. And then, of course, we get the big epic reprises at the end with full-on gospel choirs and big, powerful instrumentation. Been done before, of course, in Neal's catalog. It's just like all of the other big epic pieces that he ends in this fashion with reprises and just glorious swelling orchestration and harmonies and vocals. But it's done in such expert fashion that it's just a joy to behold. And if you're comforted by Neal's style and how he does things and how he approaches his music, I think this will just really speak to you like it does to me. And you've got 3 shorter songs in the middle. We've got Thief, which I mentioned a bit before with kind of this midsection crazy King Crimson workout, similar to like Author of Confusion or something like that. But it starts with this like stand-up jazzy bass line, some cool vocal harmonies that kind of come in with a cool effects-laden sound. Steamy jazz club style vibe, maybe almost a bit of a hip-hop influence in the drumming, and it leads to this kind of almost cool, slinky jazz club vibe. Before we get into this more musical theater style big section and into that King Crimson heaviness. And then just when you think things are stopping after this crazy chaos that just sounds like disparate elements and instruments that don't seem to even fit together, the music stops, and then we get back into that vocal swell of that Thief motif. Fantastic work, and everything comes back around and reprises itself for a big epic conclusion. All the Rage is kind of the typical Neal Morse anthemic style single that he's been doing on a lot of his releases. I think about Momentum and The Great Adventure, Grand Experiment, even back in the Spock's days with something like All on a Sunday. Just these uplifting anthemic singles that have a little bit of prog flourishes. It opens up with some really cool proggy bits to make sure you don't forget that there is prog here, but underneath it all is this almost anthemic Christian rock type song with great vocals. I love the trade-off where Neal does kind of the first verse and chorus, and then it's lifted to another level by Johnny Basaha for the second verse and chorus, adding a cool variety. Basaha is a great element into this band because he fulfills that Eric Gillette singing role, perhaps, where he's able to sing a bit higher in register and really brings home some of these really heartfelt, emotional sections. It takes Neal's vocals and kind of pushes to another level. And so it's a really great compliment, of course, to Neal's vocals as well. And we get vocals throughout the album as well from Chris Riley. So it's like we have 3 different vocalists, not unlike the Neal Morse Band, which also adds a lot of vocal talent from Bill Hubauer. So we've got a lot of parallels between this and what you'd expect in a Neal Morse Band release, which to me makes it all the more satisfying, because that's what I've craved as Neal has done these kind of Joseph albums and, Dee Virgilio, Morse and Jennings, and more singer-songwriter stuff. I've just been really craving a new Neal Morse Band album, and although we don't get Mike Portnoy and your usual figures here, we get stand-ins who are showcasing their own talent, who are able to hold their own and excel in their own ways. So it's not like, oh, they're pale imitations of the Neal Morse Band members. No, they're different, and they bring in their own different style and sound to make it its own thing, and just as equally great in its own way. And I think that's really expertly done. Ever Interceding is a beautiful acoustic guitar playing ballad, not unlike a lot of his more acoustic sounding songs. June, We All Need Some Light, Smoke and Mirrors, Not Afraid Part 1, where you get these beautiful vocals from Basaha, really anthemic feel, just really beautiful. One of Neal's best in this kind of vein, and I just really love what Basaha brings to the table. He's really given the lead vocal throughout this piece, and we get this wonderful section of this Road to Damascus sound, which really adds another layer and just has a wonderful build-up and a beautiful sound. Just some of the most beautiful melodies that you'll hear on any record this year. It's just a beautiful track that showcases all the talent that they have on display in a more shorter, softer, more melodic package, and it's just wonderfully done. And then we get the big epics to close things out. Of course, if it's a big prog release, you got to have that, and we get No Hill for a Climber with some really interesting, mysterious style sounds. It starts with this like wind and atmosphere and light vocalizations and flutes. Kind of reminds me of the opening of like Question Mark or something like that. And I also get feels of like Stranger in Your Soul from Transatlantic. And there's moments throughout that kind of make me think also of The Great Nothing from V. So you're getting a lot of touchstones of classic Neal Morse stuff. And I really love this kind of mysterious Eastern-sounding acoustic guitar and flute combo that just turns into a cool prog instrumental powerhouse. And once again, we get some cool build-ups, some dark bass, and sumptuous keyboard melodies that morph and weave through all these different cool musical moments that highlight things that you're going to hear throughout the track and really brings everything to focus as you start moving through all these different sections. Love the resounding guitar theme, which really elevates it to big heights. I really love that Burn It Down section that I mentioned that I believe Chris Riley contributed. It's one of my favorite moments on the record, just as driving beat and some cool violin stabs, and just continues to ramp up. And there's moments where it quiets down, but then comes back in full force, and it's just a really fun section. And we keep getting these big sweeping orchestral sections. We get these big build-ups back to this main theme. And I love the main theme here, No Hill for a Climber, which changes its meaning as the track continues to evolve. It starts on a more discouraging note, that there's just no hill for this climber, nothing for him to be able to achieve or do, and he feels kind of stuck and stagnant. But as the track evolves and continues, this refrain takes on a positive meaning, that there's no hill he can't climb, that there's nothing he can't do, because he has this power and motivation, and everything has come to fruition that he's ever wanted. And so it's this cool kind of reversal and turnaround of the main theme that is showcased beautifully in the lyrics, and is just one of the most uplifting, exciting finales to one of Morse's tracks that he's done, bringing some of that Eric Gillette guitar style playing to the table, done wonderfully by Andre Madetian. And we've also got that Basaha vocal, which brings us to another level as well. There's just a big triumphant play out with these horns and all of these big instrumental flourishes, orchestral sounds, great guitar playing on top of it all. Reminds me of the end of Similitude of a Dream, perhaps, Broken Sky, Long Day Reprise, which really brings it to new heights and is just like a goosebump-inducing moment. And when it all seems over and done after it fades out, we get a little bit of a reprise of the main theme in more of a string quartet style fashion. So a wonderful track that I feel like I didn't even touch on a lot of the different great highlights throughout the track, the great reprises, the great times where that cool, mysterious sounding instrumental comes back in full force and allows the players to have chances to shine with great soloing. Some Beatles-esque moments of great harmony vocals and swirling sounds, beautiful acoustic guitars. All of this is all wrapped up in all of this music, and it's just a wonder to behold. And I absolutely adore this record. It's just been getting better and better with each subsequent listen. It's exactly what I want to hear from Neal Morse. And I could hear the critics now saying that it's not much different than what you've come to expect from Neal, but that doesn't bother me all that much because I love his sound. I love his signature. And I think he has a structure that works for him. And like I said, he peppers in just enough new stuff from some of these new members to make it fresh and exciting in its own fashion. And I would caution you, if you're really averse to the more Christian-leaning lyrics that Neal's known for, this really leans heavy into that as well. I feel like maybe because he's with a group of fellow Christians that he met through church and so forth, that Neal feels a bit freer to kind of just fully embrace his Christian lyrics, but nothing too in your face, nothing that feels overtly preachy. I don't feel like Neal ever gets into that mode with his mainstream prog releases, but where things were a bit more veiled and a bit more hidden so that you could interpret the meaning for yourself in some of these Neal Morse Band releases, this is kind of out and out Christian themed with a lot of Christian themed lyrics and themes and subject matters. But like I said, it's not really a concern for me, and like I said, it never gets overtly preachy in any fashion, and it's just Neal's passion and what he loves to sing about, and I'm here for it. If he feels emotional about it and it inspires him to create such great work as he's put forth on this record, then I'm all here for it, and I hope he continues in this vein. It'll be interesting to see what the future holds, if there's going to be more Resonance albums, or if this is kind of a holdover before the full Neal Morse Band can get back together. Can these two entities kind of work in tandem? Will there be a big crossing of the minds of all of these members coming together for an epic project? Who knows what the future holds, but I love that it provides an avenue for Neal's proggier output, because that's what I've been missing lately. That's why I've been worried is not going to show up anymore because of Mike Portnoy's involvement with Dream Theater. I was worried that this meant that Neal Morse Band was completely on ice and that Neal was going to follow more of his more musical theater, singer-songwriter, Christian rock kind of feels for his future records. But I'm happy to say he has not sacrificed the prog whatsoever. It's full-blown here in big epic fashion to create one of his best releases that he's ever put out. And you got to check it out, especially if you're a Neal Morse fan. It's no-brainer. I hope you're as excited as I am about the release. If you're not a big Neal Morse person or don't know his music, check it out. If you love prog, this is great prog music, and I think is really fun to listen to and has so many great qualities, so many sticky melodies that are in your head and that you can't get out of there, and that make you want to repeat listen to the album just because it's so beautiful and so catchy and so fun and has so many layers to it that you continue to uncover as you continue to listen. So that's what I have for you today. Sorry for a longer form review. When I talk about Neal Morse, I tend to go a bit long, as many of you know, so this is a bit of a longer one. But I wanted to get my thoughts out there. I feel like I have only scratched the surface even because there's so much to uncover, so many layers to unravel. But hopefully you get an idea and an impression and run out to check out this record because it's a really great album that I just really love with my whole heart and is a contender for my favorite release of the year. As much as I hate to continue to just service my love for Neal and continue to award him and his various projects with Album of the Year over and over, it's hard to deny just how this music moves me and how it makes me feel in comparison to everything else that I'm checking out in the world of prog. But we'll see. Your mileage may vary. Everyone has different tastes and different quirks. This may not be your cup of tea, which is totally fine also, but hopefully you'll at least give it a chance, and I'd be curious to hear people's thoughts in the comments. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and hopefully you'll catch me in future episodes. I do reviews pretty regularly, almost on a weekly basis, sometimes several a week, and I'm doing many other things also on the channel. So thank you guys, and I'll catch you guys in a future episode. Bye, everybody. Enjoy the music.